Hello? Hello? Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started here in 2 to 3 minutes. Just give everybody a heads up. Hello? 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 Okay, 60-second warning. And we'll get going. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Great to see you. So, if you are here for alternative capital sources for nonprofit resilience, you're in the right room. If you're not, stay. It's going to be fun. And I hope everybody sort of has some good takeaways this morning. So really quick, I'm Steve Herman. I'm with California Bank and Trust, and we're gonna do some quick intros here in a minute. But before I start, I did want to recognize my partner in crime, Lisa Brooks, sitting in the front row here. Yay, Lisa. Lisa and I have been working together at the bank for 20, maybe? Almost 20 years, and could not do what we all do without you. So thank you, Lisa, for coordinating and helping pull this all together. I also want to do a quick plug. We do have a booth, I think, and there's a auditorium somewhere that if you have a business card, drop the card in the bowl, and you might get some free tickets to a future Padre game. So don't forget to do that. And there's some great bankers over there. And you're going to hear from Jacob here in a minute that work with the nonprofit community and understand sort of our subject matter experts in that space. There were a number, and I see Connie's still in the room with us. Thank you so much. Moving, inspirational opening this morning, and there were a bunch of words that I jotted down, and it wasn't just cooking and eating. But it included things like storms, uncertainty, collaboration, resilience, strength, trust in nonprofits. I did think, the trust in nonprofits came way above the corporate trust, so Jacob and I have some work to do. We are here. There's an opportunity in every moment that really hit home, and leading into adversity. So I think, we're going to have a lot of the same themes that come out of the conversation this morning. I sort of look at what's happened. We're 5 years and 1 quarter. Sort of bankers think in terms of quarters. We're 5 years and 1 quarter into the 2020s. And not to kind of rehash the conversation this morning, but we have lived through a lot of uncertainty. we started the decade with a global pandemic. We had some of the largest fiscal stimulus in our history. We had a regional banking crisis that, maybe affected, what we do a little bit more, had a little bit more impact. But two of the largest banks that were headquartered in California are no longer in business. First Republic and Silicon Valley, which also had big philanthropy dollars. And then we had, the largest wildfires in Southern California history, in Altadena and Pacific Palisades, and I'm in Los Angeles, so that has had a significant impact on the work of a lot of nonprofits that we work with. And then just in the last year, words like Doge, HR1, some call it the big, beautiful, others call it the big, you-know-what bill. Again, a decline in funding that we've never seen in our lifetimes. And then just recently, words like ICE, words like war. So it's been unsettling, challenging, to say the least. But I think to a lot of the discussion this morning, there's a sense of resilience within this, within the nonprofit sector and community that, seems to be able to address and lean in and do the work that you do. So, and as much as I love that, this wonderful group of people here this morning, we could just sort of wave a wand and it would all go back to, quote unquote, the new normal or normal. That's not why we're here, but we are here to think about, potential offerings, solutions, partnerships, collaborations, and ways to partner and I don't want to say fill gaps, because I think, Pamela, you did a good job kind of correcting me on that before, but how to partner with you in order to help build more resilience and sustainable strategies and efforts in this space. So we're going to do a quick series of introductions here, and I'll start. But I know there are bios in everybody's package. You can fall asleep reading those tonight. But really quick, I thought it'd be fun to kind of just do a little bit more kind of personal, in addition to kind of your name and where you work and what you do. A fun fact, boards that you maybe sit on, and how you were sort of how you kind of got into the business, so to speak. So, again, Steve Herman. I manage the bank's community development finance division. Lisa and I manage pretty much most of along with our bankers, our nonprofit partnerships up and down the state, mostly around affordable housing, economic development, community development, some health and education, and have been with the bank nearly 30 years. And I started when I was 10, but I also manage a debt and equity platform for affordable housing. So we do affordable housing lending and investment across the Western U.S. Let's see, what was my other thing? So how did I get into the business? I've always sort of been interested in public-private partnerships. I work for nonprofit, for government. I've been with the bank a long time, but I did do some nonprofit and government work before. But I think sort of what inspired me in this arena is more, my parents were both public school educators, so I think that had an influence on me. So yeah. And what else? Oh, boards. I'm on too many boards, but I like to lean in, so to speak. I serve as a chair for the Los Angeles Neighborhood Housing Services, which is a NeighborWorks organization up in Los Angeles. And then mostly housing-related, affordable housing-related type boards, LISC, LA. And my fun fact is, 38 years ago, I was in front of the Student Center down the street here. I met this nice young woman, and we've been married now for 35 years. So proud Torero alumni, Laura. Let's see. So we'll start with Ricardo.
Ricardo Flores, Executive Director of the local Yes. Ricardo Flores, Executive Director of the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC. I'll start with my fun fact. I worked on Shrek 2. And my why really is my parents, like Steve was saying, my parents are both retired public school teachers and then later principals. But they also grew up in the 1960s, and they were part of the Chicano movement and whatnot. And so they've always instilled in me this sense of giving back. And, I think if you come from a family of diversity, you see that diversity within your own family. Some of my family members chose a different path, and so that's an okay path for them. And I had another path, and so I realized how grateful I was for my path. And so you sort of spend a lot of your life trying to give back to others and help others. And that's kind of how I got here. I ended up going into politics, believe it or not, and from politics I got here to LISC. But again, it's all just been trying to do what you can to serve others and have fun along the way.
Thank you, Ricardo. Pamela?
Good morning. Pamela Gray-Payton. I am with San Diego Foundation. I serve there as the Vice President, Chief Impact and Partnerships Officer. It's wonderful being with all of you this morning. I see lots of partners and friends and colleagues in the room. San Diego Foundation's mission is to inspire enduring philanthropy to enable community solutions. We are a provider of resources to our community partners who are the real heroes who do the great work in our region. And we cannot do that work without my colleague and friend Katie Sawyer and the many, many donors who work with us at San Diego Foundation who believe in our community and want to serve our community with their resources. I have been with San Diego Foundation now 6 years almost. June 1st will be my anniversary, my 6th anniversary. I came on during the pandemic. You can imagine what that was like. Didn't meet Katie in person for probably a year and a half, before I actually saw anyone outside of a box. But in that time, we've been able to do a lot of magical work in our community, supporting our nonprofits and really lifting up our region to the best of our ability in the spaces that we know that we can make a difference. Fun fact, I can think of many. Grandparenting is much better than parenting. I have an 11-year-old granddaughter that I absolutely adore. Her father, but the 11-year-old granddaughter is pretty special. But I spend a lot of time here at the University of San Diego, so my fun fact is that the photo that I saw of the Dalai Lama reminded me of the time in 2012 when we hosted the Dalai Lama here at USD. And he was one of many incredible people that I was able to learn from while at USD for 23, almost 24 years that I worked here, including building this building that we're sitting in today. So it's nice to be back on campus, my alma mater.
Pamela, is your granddaughter's father your son or son-in-law?
That's a good question. He is my wonderful son. I have 3 children and 1 son,
good
2
answer.
daughters. Yeah. But I'm telling you, grandparenting is so cool.
And actually, I'm gonna really quick, Ricardo and Pamela, boards that you sit on or serve where you don't actually work.
I serve on many advisory councils and then a few boards, including some that are in the community foundation space. I currently chair an organization called the Community Foundation Opportunity Network, which is a nationwide effort where community foundations who have very similar visions, missions that we have, come together and share resources, information, ideas, strategy. And then I currently serve as the board chair for the Monarch School here in San Diego, as well as a few other small nonprofits. And how did I get to this role, I think was one of the questions that you had. In 2019, my youngest daughter was then a freshman at UCLA, and she'd said, Mom, I'm not going to USD. She'd spent her life at USD, and said, what do you want to do? Meaning that I no longer had to continue to work at the university, though I loved this place. But I hadn't given that a lot of thought. Like, what do I want to do when I grow up? You'd think after 24 years I'd have an answer. What I really enjoyed was my service on on boards in our community. I really, really felt passionate about the work of our nonprofits and wanted to support our nonprofits. So when I thought about what I'd like to do, I thought, if only we could get more money into the hands of nonprofits to help them do the work that they're so capable of doing, that would give me a lot of joy. And serendipitously, a few months later, I get a call about a role that pours money into the community through the foundation. Like, someone's listening.
I love your title, Impact and Partnership Officer. Yeah, that's great. And Ricardo, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm on the City County Reinvestment Task Force, and I was on the San Francisco Federal Reserve Community Advisory Committee, which was interesting.
Great. All right, last but not least.
Yeah, as Steve mentioned, I'm with California Bank and Trust. I've been with the bank for 16 years. I manage a corporate banking team. I myself I'm a subject matter expert in the nonprofit world, specifically banking larger, more complex nonprofits throughout the state of California. In my nonprofit life, I'm very passionate about giving back to the community, so I've served on the United Way board as board chair for a couple of years. I was part of the finance committee for many years. I served on the San Diego Workforce Partnership Policy Advisory Board for a couple of years, and currently I serve on the YMCA corporate board and the finance chair, or excuse me, on the finance committee. Fun fact about myself, right before, 1 month before COVID, I met my now wife in Mexico City on Bumble, and now we have 2 beautiful daughters, and we live in Eastlake. So, yeah.
Congratulations. That's great. And how did you kind of get pulled into what sort of inspired you to get into this business?
Well, I think it's my family, my parents, the upbringing they gave me. It's just giving back to the community. So I ever since I remember, I've volunteered, when I was a teenager, Habitat for Humanity. When I first got into work, we were doing junior achievement, United Way campaigns. And so it's something that was instilled to me by my family.
That's great. So I think one of the takeaways, and the panel, I think, represents, different sources of capital and funding that is available in the market to nonprofits. And so we kind of have, I think, a series of just short, I don't want to call them commercials, but presentations on sort of, where each panelist sort of fits within what I might think about in terms of like the capital stack, and where, depending on where you are, in your financial future or where you're heading, you want to access capital at different times for different reasons, and it's not kind of a one size fits all. It's sort of a I don't want to say a gunshot approach, but really thinking about how to match sources with uses, which is kind of what I do as a banker every day. But we're going to start with Jacob, who has a presentation on a very specific sort of program and product that is offered, universally, but I think we do it better. So we'll let him start.
Yeah, I realize when you think about alternative capital, loans don't really come to mind. You usually think of grants, contracts, service revenue. But it is a source of capital that you can get out there in the market. And there is a very specific type of financing that nonprofits get, and it's called tax-exempt financing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it today and how it works and give you an example. So the first thing, why would you want to do tax-exempt financing? Number one, it's available to all nonprofits, low interest rates, longer amortizations, flexible covenants. Helps you build the endowment. You can delay using your own cash, and enables you to compete in your sector. So projects that you can use it for, you can use it if you're purchasing a building, if you're doing tenant improvements, if you're building a theater like this. Things that you can't use it for, you couldn't use it for if you wanted to get a line of credit to cover your payroll. You couldn't use it for something like that. So I'm going to skip, actually. I think they got some of my presentation slides are missing here. So I'm going to skip back here and just talk about what tax-exempt financing is. And tax-exempt financing is something that's particular only to 501c3s. And it's a type of financing to where the bank or the lender does not have to pay federal income taxes. And so since we don't pay federal income taxes, we are able to lower the interest rate for you. So we are able to give you a tax-exempt rate versus what we call a taxable rate. I'll there. So let me skip ahead here a little bit. And then this provides an example here. So let's just say, for example, you had a $15 million loan. Your taxable rate would be 5.5% on there. And then if we were able to certify it as tax exempt, it would turn into 4.35%. So that's a pretty substantial difference when you're looking at financing. You can see the annual P&I payments, the savings you would get over 1 year, about $130,000. But if you're looking over a 10-year period, that savings, is up to $1.3 million. So we'll talk about a transaction that we recently did here. This is for a nonprofit that does a lot of different things. I mean, they have a food bank. They're helping people with their taxes. Lots of different things that they were doing. And they were in the process. They leased 3 buildings for the organization, and they've been in these buildings for 20-some years. They had the opportunity to purchase them, so they used the tax-exempt financing program. So their loan request was for $10 million. One of the interesting things about them is that when you look at their financial statements, they have a lot of donations. And if there's CFOs in here and you're trying to explain to your banker or anyone else, like, okay, what is that donation revenue line? What is that donation expense line in there? It's very hard to do. And so they had a lot of this stuff here, and we were able to navigate that with them because we have that understanding of how donations go through the financial statements. So here's what we ended up with at the end of the day for them. So we did a 20-year loan for them, 30-year amortization, and we were able to get them a 4.67% rate. And for an organization like this is very helpful because they also have they have an endowment. And, they're able to borrow long-term rates at, 4.6%, but their endowment, is earning anywhere from 5 to 7%. So they're leveraging their own assets and able to produce more capital for the organization. So. Let's see. Words of wisdom, just, embrace simplicity. Choose the right partners. I can't, highlight that importance of, choosing the right partners. You want to work with someone that understands the nonprofit industry. If someone came to me and asked me if you're in the biotech industry and you wanted me to help you with a biotech loan, I would not be that person. So, the person you work with is very important. And just, making it an efficient process, again, working with that right person as well. So, and then I think that's it. Again, sorry, the presentation's missing a few slides. I think they took an older presentation, so, in it. But I'll turn it back to you, Steve.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jacob. And I was going to actually ask, just a kind of a show of hands, how many folks in the audience are sort of on the finance or might be related to making financial decisions, on this type of, okay, thank you. I think that's helpful in, this sort of reminds me, and it dovetails really well into, I think we'll have Ricardo go next, thinking about, so this is an opportunity to finance probably maybe a little more seasoned nonprofit that might have, a community facility, they're looking for a larger acquisition. But how do you kind of even get to that point? How do you get to the point where, this organization is ready? And what does it take to kind of lead up to that? And I think the transition, and working with a conventional bank. And so I think that the transition to Ricardo is helpful because, LISC and CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, are sort of precursors to more conventional type of debt and potentially equity. But it's sort of that pre-development, early financing, potentially some grant money, some technical assistance that can help kind of get you to the point where, boy, maybe we can, acquire a new facility or a new place of operation. So, Ricardo, I teed it up for you.
Thank you. So LISC is what's called a Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI. All credit unions are CDFIs. So we are a non-depository CDFI, so we don't take money from depositors, and we're a nationwide organization. Essentially what happens is that banks, traditional banks, lend LISC money, which is recourse to us on our balance sheet, and then we re-lend that money out to nonprofits, specifically nonprofit developers to build affordable housing. But we also, because of our ability to do what I've just said, we can also lend to nonprofits as well, and we can also provide that guidance. And Steve's absolutely right. You know, one of the things about LISC is, as a nonprofit, and we have a lender in each market. So I have a colleague that's a lender, like a multifamily lender, so that he understands how money moves through projects and how capital can flow to build things or to buy things. But one of the things LISC can do is we can just talk to you. And we can explain to you what we know and explain to you how to work with the traditional banking market, because nothing supplants the traditional banking market, right? At the end of the day, if you want to grow, if you want to grow wealth, if you want to grow your nonprofit, you really do have to establish a relationship with a traditional bank. But CDFIs, as Steve said, can provide you sort of that guidance and help you understand how to look at your balance sheets, how to understand how your balance sheet actually has assets and liabilities that are either good or bad, right? And that's really important, because oftentimes, again, when you're dealing with a bank, you're dealing with people who are, you know, this is a private sector enterprise, and that's okay. That's what they do, and that's really important. But we can kind of take a little longer and explain to you what we see, and we're not going to charge you for that. We're really just trying to help you better understand what you can do as an organization and how you can see your book. So again, you're absolutely right. You know, folks can reach out to us, call us and say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're trying to do. And if you look at my board, it's predominantly all banks, CRA banks. And so again, we have this really great relationship where we work with banks, where we can ask them these questions. Hey, I'm seeing this, or this is what's going on in our area. And sometimes actually, because money is so interesting. Money, you know, I went to film school, and I never really would have thought money was a creative endeavor, but it's a very creative endeavor. And so if you have someone like Steve and Jacob and others together in a room, they can help basically mitigate the risk for their institution to get the money to where it should go, right? That's really what we're talking about here, is you want money to your organization. The banks, the CDFIs, and everybody else is trying to mitigate the risk of not being paid back. But you also have something else as nonprofits. You have individuals who are philanthropically giving you money, maybe in the community or whatnot. Those grants that those folks provide can actually be used to provide you loans, because you can actually use that grant capital that tells a group like LISC, lend to me, because if something goes wrong, that grant capital is sitting there. So it can get really wonky and really creative, but again, don't be shy of the conversation. I went to film school. I'm not a natural banker. I'm not a natural finance person. And so it's okay to ask questions. And I think CDFIs provide that space that Steve's talking about, where you can ask questions like, this may be stupid, this may be dumb. No, it's not. Because we know your mission is to serve the community, not to be financial experts.
And thanks, Ricardo. And I think, you know, groups like LISC, other CDFIs in the marketplace, they provide also that TA, the technical assistance, the explanation on you know, how you might approach, you know, a transaction, kind of, pull away and make things a little more transparent than walking into a bank, which could be a very foreign and sort of, you know, confusing, daunting place. Although we try not to make that happen. So, Pamela, you know, I think people relate nonprofits and philanthropy as sort of like the primary go-to, you know, and I guess thinking about this, all the themes of resilience and uncertainty that was discussed this morning, you know, the Unity project and initiative that you guys have promoted and stood up, I think is a great example on collaboration and, you know, how we're working together across the sector to deliver capital and funding. So if you don't mind, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and for the audience as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Unity Fund and how it came to be. A year ago, our community was starting to understand the impact that the loss of federal funding was going to have locally. And I think, by now we probably have a number of about $900 million that has been lost in federal funding, whether they be grants, different types of funding sources from the federal government for all sectors. So almost $1 billion has been lost locally in the last year. Philanthropy would love to say that we can fill that gap, but that's just not possible. So how instead can we collaborate with our community partners and bring together the greatest resources that we can? Some of that is through helping nonprofits with strategy, and occasionally that means bringing nonprofits together to partner on projects. Occasionally it does mean a grant. And so with the Unity Fund, we've been able to bring together 3 large philanthropies locally, the Prebis Foundation, Price Philanthropies, and San Diego Foundation, each of which has contributed a fairly significant amount above and beyond their normal grant making to help nonprofits find a way through this current disaster that we're in. For San Diego Foundation, it also was an opportunity to invite our donors to contribute to the fund. So the Unity Fund has been very, very fortunate to receive almost over $500,000 from donors who have contributed as well to support the fund and the community. What we have seen in the last few months is the Unity Fund has awarded grants to about 100 different nonprofits. In fact, many of them in the room. So if you've received a Unity Fund grant or grant from San Diego Foundation in the last 6 months, wave your hand. A few of you, more, please. We've had hundreds of applications, and some really, really stellar projects. We're focused on housing security, food access, and access to healthcare. Those are the areas that are most impacted right now. It's everything. It's education, it's healthcare, it's housing, it's all of the things that people need to survive. But what we've been able to do with our partners at Prebis and Price is to focus on 3 different categories of funding and try to get money into the hands of the nonprofit community as quickly as possible. The funds have come through, or the application has come through the form of an LOI. So we invite organizations to tell us how they would use the funds. And once they are moving towards approval, we have them complete a full application. Grants have ranged in amounts. Some are smaller based on the applicant's request, to $350,000 is the largest thus far. We do have a couple of big projects that are forthcoming that are going to really help with the housing issue. A lot of people are losing their homes. A lot of people, as of today, will lose access to healthcare, particularly our refugee and immigrant community. And so we are really zeroing in with this fund in spaces and places where we know it's going to make the greatest impact because people have lost their access to the support that they have depended on for quite some time.
Hello? There you go. No, that's amazing, and I think this theme of collaboration and partnership, is, in times of sort of upheaval and challenges that we're facing, seems to resonate across sort of all communities and strategies. And I think about the wildfires up in Altadena and the work that we're doing, Lisa and I working with Neighborhood Housing Services of LA County, and in the partnerships that have sort of coalesced around that work, sort of aligns, I think, with what's happening on the funding side. Where the challenges are so broad that you just can't do it by yourself. And it's interesting because it also there are challenges in collaborating. It's the sort of there's the turf battles, there's the stepping on toes, there's the politics, and I think those are some of the things that you also have to kind of go in with with your eyes wide open. But again, I think, when there's a mission and a focus to improve, then things can work out.
Can I comment on that,
Yeah.
Steve? I'm very proud to say that our collaboration between Price Prebys and San Diego Foundation started prior to the crisis that we're in. So it really created a really wonderful foundation for us to bring together our resources, bring together our best practices to serve our community in the most efficient, effective way possible, really zeroing in on the areas where we each have expertise. And I should have mentioned that collectively, the Unity Fund is a $70 million effort. Between the three organizations, we have each contributed above and beyond our normal grant making, a total of $70 million in the last year. Some of those dollars are still remaining to be awarded, but it has been extraordinary to see the collaboration, the level of collaboration between the philanthropic partners in San Diego. And that's really just one effort. There is also, and Megan Thomas, I know, spoke earlier from Catalyst, where the collective philanthropic community in San Diego, there are probably 14 or 15 of us that meet every other week to talk about how we are showing up for the community in a way that is very strategic. So if you have an area of expertise, let's hear what you're learning and how we can all partner to support that work. It's really exactly what we're asking our nonprofits to do, to think collaboratively, to partner with one another, to help us reduce redundancy. We're doing the same thing and modeling for the community what it is that we really hope to see developing over time.
I think that transitions again into some themes that we were thought about sharing and around partnerships and collaboration. And so I'm curious, Ricardo or Jacob, if I think coming from a bank, it's maybe a little bit different perspective, but any examples that you want to share around partnership and collaboration and sort of capital solutions when it comes to that sort of discussion or examples?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? Is for LIST, that's our key is collaborating, because at the end of the day, we don't have, like a nonprofit, you guys have an audience. You guys have people you're serving. We don't really have that. So we have to partner with you in order to be effective. And so that's what we're always looking for. And the one way I can look at it is in our affordable housing work that we do. We've been able to partner with institutions, financial institutions, to essentially create pre-development loans that are cheaper, but that the maturity is longer. And that's important because our affordable housing developers need longer time with the loan in order to get the tax credit from the state. And so that's one example of partnering with a philanthropic or a bank in this case to do that work. Another partnership we have is with the San Diego Foundation, where the San Diego Foundation has said, look, we want to provide home ownership opportunities to people. And so the foundation has said, here, Liz, we're going to provide you some capital. You're going to work with your banking partners, and you're going to deploy that capital to eligible families. So it's partnering is really crucial. The other thing we do with nonprofits oftentimes is, we have a great partnership with the refugees group that we've been doing with the state of California. The state of California said, hey, look, under this governor said, we want to provide small dollar amounts to small refugee and asylee businesses, so like $5,000. So these groups came to LISC and said, look, if we all band together and we utilize LISC's balance sheet and its ability to actually execute, we have a better shot at getting this proposal. And they were right. And so in a sense, the state invested in us, and then we invested in those partners. And part of that investment is really in those partners is to say, here, let's look at your books. How are you looking at the world? And let's strengthen your numbers and your balance sheets. Because ultimately, then those nonprofits can then go after, at some point, CDBG dollars. And if you get CDBG dollars, you get state dollars, right? So again, it's just partnering and trying to utilize what our strengths are, which is working with banks and financing and philanthropy, and then really not to supplant what the nonprofits do, but to help the nonprofits, because the nonprofits have their strength, and their strength is the services that they're providing.
Anything you want to add to that, Jacob? Either in your day job or your board duties.
Well, I mean, when partnering for us, I mean, it really comes down to what we offer the most is our knowledge. And, you know, I'll circle back to the example I provided earlier about the nonprofit organization that had the donations. You know, they were with another institution for 10 years, and that institution couldn't read their financial statements. They couldn't understand, you know, where all these expenses and revenues were coming through. And so when they look at it, they're like, oh, this organization, they can't pay us back. And so, you know, it was through our knowledge and expertise is that we came in there and were able to provide a solution that other places couldn't provide. So,
you know, partnerships and collaboration kind of roll off our tongues, but how do you do it? I mean, you know, it's one thing, hey, collaborate, hey, you know, kind of get in there. And Pamela, you mentioned, you know, you started the conversations with your counterparts early, which I think is sort of critical. But, you know, from a really practical place, and I know there's a lot of leaders in the room, but I'm thinking also, you know, when you're a junior staff member or you're learning the business, you know, what are the steps that you take to create partnerships and collaboration? I don't know if any thoughts on I have my own thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours.
Well, with San Diego Foundation, we have several grant programs where we really encourage partnership amongst the grantees. And so there are probably a few organizations in here who have been part of such a conversation where we say, you know, the grant intent is this. Your organization is really great in this one area of that, and another organization is fantastic in another area of this grant intent. Let's bring the two of you together to talk about whether or not a collaboration between the two of you would be a successful way to approach your grant intention. And we have found to doing that, and particularly through the cohort model that we currently have, has been very, very successful. And there are a few of those organizations here today. I also want to mention that San Diego Foundation hosts a conference now. I think we're in our third year of a conference, the San Diego Fundraising Conference, supported largely by PNC Bank, and Valerie Atisha is here from PNC. It's a place where organizations are really encouraged to learn how to, given tools to actually learn how to do the work even better and thinking outside of the box. You know, once you're in this work, it's easy just to repeat the cycles that have been known for years. How do we create more innovative approaches to solving the problems that we are facing today? These problems are new for many of us, and if we look at the challenges ahead of us, dollars alone are not the solution, but it's really an opportunity for us to think differently about how we do the work, who we're partnering with, how do we get back to a place where the dollars are stretched and used as effectively as possible. And it really is something that we're very focused on at the foundation in many, many different ways. Hosting the conference every September is one place where we're literally providing participants, attendees with tools, with knowledgeable speakers and experts who can help you utilize the tools that exist today that didn't exist a decade ago, or certainly, even 5 years ago when we found ourselves facing one crisis after another. COVID, for each nonprofit represented today, COVID created a challenge that we'd never seen before, and it has been persistent since then. It's been one issue after another that has forced us to really think differently about how do we deliver the work that we do. Higher education is asking that question of itself. How does higher ed face the challenges that it has today, still delivering the best to our students, but understanding students don't have the resources that they recently had?
No, I love that, and I think you mentioned PNC. We have. I sort of think of the banking community as friendly competitors, and I think the people that are in this sort of community development, lending, finance arena, we know each other, and I often collaborate with my counterparts across the industry to sort of I focus specifically around affordable housing, but I'm sure it happens in other arenas. So yeah, that's great. And I love the ability to kind of create spaces for it to happen is something, and that kind of capacity building is something that I sort of think of in my community development, 1.0 days that hasn't necessarily been as prominent maybe in where we are today.
Steve, I would agree, and I would just say for each of us, it's understanding what our strengths are as well as our weaknesses, and where there are partners who can help us in those spaces where we aren't as strong. And similarly, returning the same support to them. That's what makes the region strong.
That's great. Let me see, where are we doing on time? Geez. I mean, we could pivot. I got the 20-minute high sign from Lisa here. I mean, we could pivot to Q&A if you like, or, I mean, we were also, had some themes around policy, public policy, civic engagement, and where we are currently as a society and how that has sort of had or not had as much of an impact in the work that we do. But I'm open. What do you guys?
Let me question on collaboration. I was going to say that LISC has an interesting perspective because on the one hand we are a funder, but on the other hand I'm also looking for money. So I had this really unique way, and so people will say, "Gosh, you're making a $5 million loan, but you're asking for a $20,000 grant to operate your office? What? That doesn't make sense." And so I kind of have both mind frames, and so having both mind frames, I also have to look for money like you all. And so one of the things I would say is to reach out to people, to talk to people, whether it's CRA Bank folks locally, whether it's philanthropic organizations, and don't ask them for anything. Just tell them what you do. Invite them. Share with them. This is what I'm doing. This is why I do it, et cetera, right? Have a relationship with them. And maybe as the philanthropic groups or the philanthropic groups or the banks change their priorities and their goals, maybe you'll start to fit into that. The other question, too, is ask them, what are your goals? What are you guys trying to accomplish? And again, you may not fit in there. Maybe their goal is to, to save the animals in the water, and your goal is to feed people. But at the end of the day, still have that conversation with them. I think that's really important to establish that relationship. And if you don't know where to look, oftentimes, one easy thing to do is if there's a nonprofit like you in LA, who gives them money, right? Which banks sit on their boards, if any? Because those banks may then be in our market, right? So it's really, again, looking at how you can create collaborations. And the other part for LISC is we are both. We actively look for collaboration. For example, we have a program where we did years ago where we created public space in City Heights, and we brought together a bunch of nonprofits, and we gave them funding for being there. We put together a plan, and we created this public space there called Fair at 44 that's now transitioned somewhere else. So we actively go out there and look for groups, and then groups actively come look for us. So it's kind of it's a two-way street. And then the last thing I'll say is your public officials as well, right? Reach out to your public officials. Again, it's not that they're going to give you anything, you're asking for anything, but they should know what you're doing, and they should know you're in their community doing this, and their staff should be aware of it as well, right? And invite them to things. Again, build a relationship. Don't just say the first call, I need something. Build that relationship, right?
Those are great suggestions. Thank you, Ricardo. So why don't we just go ahead and open it up for questions? If I'm sure you guys have lots of good questions you want to. Matt, Brian, do you have a question?
Sure, I'll throw one at Ricardo. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you.
I wonder if either you or Pamela could speak to, as a source in the community that I would imagine a lot of nonprofits look up to and look to for support, how you think about your board composition, or in your case, Ricardo, the advisory committee.
So it's interesting, a lot of my board members are banks, which is great because, it's a two-way street. We learn a lot from them, and they provide us a lot of support as well. We're always looking to expand that because at the end of the day, our board's an advisory board. And so what we're trying to do is get different perspectives, right? And, the one thing about having worked in politics for about a decade is most politicians and their staffs don't know anything real deep. They know everything very shallow. And so you get really accustomed to asking a lot of questions. And our board members are the experts, right? They've been in banking for 30 years, or they've done certain things for, for 20, 30. They're the experts. And so it's really almost as the head of LISC in San Diego, it's really saying things to them and hearing what they say back. If they say, that doesn't make sense, then you stop saying it. If they say, oh, that makes sense, actually, that's a good idea, then you keep going, right? So that's the tricky part. And my board's not a non-fiduciary board, so that may be a little different for some of you. But again, so you're gonna want, obviously, people that can help you with the fiduciary side of your board, which is really important. But other than that, you're gonna want people with different perspectives who add value, because ultimately, in my opinion, again, this is going back to my film stuff, I think of the world as a creative endeavor, right? And the world is information, information, information. And who can see the path between it all is the person that can take advantage of that in a good way, right? And so you don't want to be so siloed that you're not seeing the forest from the trees. Even if your whole goal is just to feed people, you still want to understand the rest of the picture, because maybe you can be a part of it, or maybe you can find other groups that can supplement and help you do that work, right? Because human beings are not just hungry. They may be hungry, unclothed, and they may need housing, right? So how do you work together in partnership to do that? And lastly, because when you do go to a funder like myself or Pamela, what we want to know is, how can this support help you go forward? Not how can this support help you every year, right? Because what if we're not here next year? And what if the money's not here next year? So what's your story, how this is going to be a catalytic opportunity for you to going forward?
Our board is composed of industry experts. I think the thing that is most important is that they are San Diegans. They understand our community. They're people who are engaged in the community, in both public and private sector, and people who can provide powerful, strong leadership and a voice in the community on behalf of the foundation. I think we're somewhere around 19 members currently, and most of those folks all of them represent a range of industries in our region, but bring a really, really strong voice and values to the organization.
There's a question in the back there.
There was a question earlier.
So I'm Kimberly Whitesmith. I'm the Dean of the School of Leadership and Education Sciences here at the University of San Diego, which houses the Nonprofit Institute. So welcome, everyone. I just wanted to, you asked a question about partnership and collaboration. I just want to remind people that NPI also has a wide database of nonprofits, what they do, what they support, and so that is also a resource to the community to look for other like entities to help build partnerships across the community. My question is this: I grew up in the Los Angeles nonprofit arena, and there we worked with banks to build trusted relationships for folks who come into the banks as clients to build trust. And they, a lot of time look for nonprofit entities, places to be, philanthropy, to give their monies to. And the banks keep trusted lists of different entities, programs, nonprofits that they offer to their clients, to their customers as potential for supports. Is that something that happens in the San Diego area with banks, and how do you build relationships in that arena?
Yeah, actually, there are organizations that we work with. If, for instance, we can't provide financing to a nonprofit, we have organizations that we refer them to. Nonprofits can actually qualify for a Cal State guarantee, very similar to the SBA guarantee. Here locally in San Diego, some of you guys might be familiar with Mission Driven Finance. They're an organization here that provides financing to nonprofits. And I think actually I saw David, the CEO, here earlier from a distance, but I've referred several nonprofits over to Mission Driven here in town.
Yes, we do. And in fact, I think if you're an organization that has a specific target community being low, moderate income, 80% or below, and you could kind of document that, I would hit every bank in town and, for support, because there's a law that was put in place back in the 80s called the Community Reinvestment Act, CRA, which I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with, that requires banks to invest into not just the La Jolla's of town, but across all the markets where they do business and where they have a physical branch. And so I'm also the CRA officer for the bank. Lisa and I collaborate on partnering with nonprofits that we do business with, but that we also support with grants. Last year we did, I guess, just over about 100 grants to different nonprofits up and down the state. And, we're always looking to align with organizations that sort of align with, where we're focused, in particular around housing, community development, and economic development, so sort of small business development activities generally, but we also support arts and education organization, some health related type groups. So yeah, no, it's a great suggestion, and I think something that all organizations should be familiar with. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Steve, with regard to your CRA work, curious if there's been any thought as to how to treat the new, the one big beautiful bill, the 1% corporate threshold for donations, how that's going to change the nature of giving by corporations to nonprofits. Are they shifting the nature of their giving from giving to sponsorship? How are corporations dealing with that?
I've been on the fringe of this. Ms. Brooks has been right in the middle of it. But it has created a lot more reporting requirements, I know. And there is now a lot more attention on dollars going towards operational support, programmatic support versus sponsorships, if I understand correctly. You might want to do a sidebar with Lisa, who's right here in the front row, because she's sort of neck deep in it. I support her as much as I can on that front. But yeah, and then banks will have sort of their corporate giving that's sort of I think embedded programmatically in house. But then a lot of banks will also have foundations that sit kind of parallel or outside. So sometimes it's good to kind of think and figure out where things are split that way. I think there's a little bit more there's more flexibility working sort of directly with us, but but the dollar amounts are less versus the foundation, the bank foundations, which may be a little bit more complicated. But the dollar amounts could be bigger.
Grace, I will say San Diego Foundation has learned that we can't be all things. And so we've really had to zero in on the spaces where we believe we can make the greatest impact with the resources that we have available to us. Occasionally I'll meet someone at an event who tells me about their organization and they were not on the radar. We'll invite them to be a part of the next grant cycle that is relevant for the work that they do. And then, sometimes it is the impact statement, just reading about the work that you're doing, that seems aligned to the work that we do. And occasionally, we have some programs, a new initiative called Born Well, where we look at an issue And we know that it's an issue that is impacting a population in our region, but doesn't seem to be coordinated in any way. No one seems to be prioritizing the issue. And so we'll bring together various partners who we believe can play a role in addressing that issue, and with philanthropic support, help build a strategy to change conditions in the region. You know, we're very committed to systemic change, so I'm not only interested in how a grant can solve a problem today, but how a grant can actually change a system that's broken. You know, the partnership that we have with Ricardo and Lisk is the result of folks being left out of home ownership for generations. How does philanthropy partner with organizations to change the conditions so that a generation from now, that's no longer the problem that we're trying to solve? That's really how we look at everything. You know, it's not just, I mean, right now there's certainly some band-aiding that's necessary just because of the condition, the circumstances that we're living in, but we're very, very focused on systemic change, problems that if I can work with Kimberly, you know, Dean Smith here at USD to address an issue that has been underlying problem for communities for generations, and one day we will have solved the problem, that gets me really, really excited. We're working on one right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that the part of that is understanding what each entity does. So philanthropy is really, they're crucial, but again, they're using these big dollars from these donors to try to make, you know, giant changes if they can, right? And so that's how you have to understand philanthropy. Whereas CRA, you have to find out from those banks what they're looking at, right? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to do education? Are they trying to do the environment? Are they trying to do housing? What is it? Groups like LISC, we're interested in housing and economic development, but we're also interested in a whole other bunch of other stuff, right? So it's really, again, it's knowing your audience. It's really knowing your audience. That's really the most important thing. And again, I think, you know, you can call banks and you could say, hey, tell me about you. Tell me what you, like you said, what are you investing in? They'll tell you right away, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Perfect. I'd love to tell you just a quick second about what we're doing in our community. Oh, wonderful. Maybe there's an invitation at some point to come visit with us. Perfect, that's wonderful. Again, build a relationship. And that should be the fun part, right? Because you're getting to meet somebody, who cares about the community, who cares about investing. It should be a fun exercise to do, really, at the end of the day. Because ultimately, maybe there's some synergy, not now, but later, right? Or maybe, you know, they're investing in something else. But again, when you talk to philanthropy, you're always really trying to better understand how that $1 can be utilized to catalyze a change or to catalyze additional dollars.
I was on a call yesterday. We had a board meeting, and the executive director told me that she had had 14 calls with a funder, only to find out that they got rejected. So, you know, to your point, it's tough, and I was surprised because this particular executive director, I'm surprised she typically doesn't take more than like 2 meetings before she's in or out. But it was a significant, you know, funding opportunity. But I think, again, kind of getting back to the banks, you know, the banks are governed by law to deploy capital, you know, grant capital in, you know, to organizations that support low, moderate income. So that's kind of like a just channel or funnel, you know, silo that we have to operate within. But I think, you know, we're always looking to support organizations that we feel like there's a true partnership. And that may be, you know, banking with us, but it also in many ways can be, you know, Lisa and I talk a lot about, you know, we're not going to show up with the big check. We'll show up with like the big physical check, but it just may not have as many zeros on it as some of the bigger banks. But we like to lead with our human capital, you know, serving on boards, serving on committees, supporting the organization in ways, you know, having subject matter expert bankers, you know, that we can refer organizations to kind of help support that way. So those are some of the things that kind of go into our decision making.
I was going to mention too, whenever you're asking for money, what I like to tell groups that I'm asking for is, I got a great opportunity for you, right? This is an opportunity for you, right? To invest in something really worthwhile, invest in people, invest in something, right? So that's one way of looking at that. And even when someone says no, you say, well, you know what, I'd still like to keep in touch with you. I'd still like to put you on my newsletter, right? All of us in this room who are nonprofit work, we're gonna do this because it's in our blood to help people, right? And so maybe that group, that entity isn't ready yet, but that's okay. Maybe they will be later. But I'm gonna keep reminding you of the good work that I'm doing. And if I'm doing things that are breaking, opportunity, hey, I wanna tell you, remember I was sharing with you the other day that we did it. Wonderful. The other thing I would say is, if California Bank and Trust is willing to make a grant into you, then go to another bank or another group and say, I've got an opportunity to get $20,000, Pamela, but I need to unlock another 20 to get that. Leverage it, right? Leverage it. What's the worst Pamela can say? We're not interested. That's okay, then go to somebody else. I got $20,000 and I want to leverage that to somebody else, right? Take that one win and try to get another win out of it, right? Utilize that to build, right?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ellie Brown. I'm Executive Director of San Diego Food System Alliance, and I've been with our organization for 12 years, and just kind of noticing the patterns, right, of the ecosystem and what's happening right now. During COVID, it felt like, and it was a different era, different term, I suppose, of the federal administration, but to me, it kind of felt like a portal for change. And we work on system change, and this is why I say this, but there are resources flowing, PPP, different resources. It felt like it was flowing much more fluidly. And, general operating support was like a big thing at that point, I feel like kind of narrative-wise. But now it feels like a shrinkage. It feels like a scarcity mindset is really trying to take over. And of course, that's very much happening from the top, the federal administration pulling the rug under nonprofits. So given that we are in a state that is progressive, we have a governor race coming up, and this might have been kind of the line of topics that you were about to cover. Can we look at this as a portal? And if so, what are opportunities that we can really think about how we can resource our communities in a much more bolder way moving forward? I'm curious if those kind of conversations are coming up, particularly maybe in the foundation and nonprofit spaces.
Ellie, I think you're spot on with the conversation around civic health and civic engagement, which has contributed to the problem that we're all dealing with today. The lack of prioritizing education around voting, getting involved, being a part of the community. And it's something that we are thinking about a lot at the foundation, and investing in nonprofits who are particularly focused on young people and activating our young people to be more involved in their communities and using their voice to express themselves. I do see this as a period. I certainly wish that we weren't here, but now that we are, how do we learn from this? How do we emerge stronger and smarter going forward? Because after COVID, in my view, we were startled and shaken, but we returned to what was normal, to what was expected. We can't do that again. And I don't know that we'll even have a chance. Economists have predicted that this crisis has set us back 30 years. So the recovery isn't going to be what it was after COVID, when the federal government was pouring money into organizations and into communities, into states. That's not going to happen. And so the recovery is going to take all of us thinking differently about how we work together and how we support our communities in a very, very different way than what we've done. And for me, for us at the foundation, at the very heart of that is our civic health. And I'm worried about voter suppression. I'm worried about the media, where people are getting their information, the lack of the emergence of misinformation and the lack of having solid, reliable sources where people are currently motivated to vote. You know, if people voted in 2024 because they wanted to lower egg prices, because that's the TikTok video that I saw that really moved me, you know, I voted against my own self-interest, and I don't want to see that happen again.
Yeah, I would say it is a change. Even groups like LIST, even though we're national, we are definitely starting to think we can't be as reliant on groups like the federal government, which is strange. We just can't be reliant upon them. They're not a consistent partner. And I think that's what all of us have seen, right? And I really do applaud the San Diego Foundation and Prebis and Price for really kind of stepping up and saying, how can we pull our resources together? And so if I was in your shoes, what I would be doing is reaching out to groups that are doing the same work I'm doing and having a larger conversation amongst yourselves about what's the need and how do you go about it, and then presenting that to these foundations that are here regionally. Because again, we've kind of just realized this, we're gonna have to get ourselves out of our problems. The federal government's not that interested, unfortunately, in our problems. Okay, that's fine. And so then how do we utilize that resource, right? And it's interesting with us in San Diego too, it's also seeing the nexuses. So if you're doing food insecurity, you know who's got a lot of food insecurity? Our military men and women. Well, how does that play a role in all of this, right? So is that another way of bringing resources here from groups that maybe like the federal government to say, hey, we're providing money or resources to military men and women, why can't we get some support for that, right? So it's thinking about things like that. What are the resources in our own community that make us unique and strong? And we have a lot going for us in San Diego in that respect.
I think you framed that really well, and I think it's so easy to get discouraged and complacent, but I get encouraged and excited knowing that there's rooms like this. And by the way, USD in San Diego, thumbs up. You guys do a great job in coordinating and organizing around this sector. Even better, I've lived in LA now 35 years, and it's just not as, I think, organized. So, but, I think, Pamela, you hit it on the head, civic health, teaching kids how to, actually be critical thinkers. I got 4 kids, and most of them are done with college, but, those are sort of some of the basic elements of, understanding where we are and where we want to be. So, I'm encouraged by the work. So, anyway, I think we've run out of time. I want to thank Ricardo, Pamela, Jacob for your insight and and thank you. I think it's lunchtime.